Hello, I'm Callie Lyons with FITSNews, and today we're talking with the FITSNews team about covering what might be called the trial of the century, the Murdaugh murder trial. So today I'm here with founding editor Will Folks, research director Jen Wood, and our technology expert, Dylan Nolan. First of all, Will, let's start with you. What was it like to take on this challenge, which seems unprecedented for an operation the size of FITSNews?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it really is something unprecedented, not only for an outlet our size to break a story like this, but to really continue to drive it through the various narrative progressions that we've seen over the last couple of years. You know, most stories like this, you know, the mainstream media comes in and kind of starts to dominate. But, you know, FITSNews from the beginning has really, I think, led the charge on this story. We've broken all of the major developments related to the crime, to the investigation, to the prosecution. And then obviously as the trial began to unfold earlier this year, we continued to really lead the way in breaking that news. And, you know, I think Callie just, you know, everybody on this call worked incredibly hard, pulling their weight and the weight of three others. You know, you have to do that to compete against the kind of resources that we were competing at. So total team effort, you know, and just can't say enough about everybody on this call for how hard they worked to be competitive on a story this big.
So as you were going into it, what kind of challenges did you foresee covering a trial on a daily basis and basically going live with it every day?
Well, I was lucky that I really didn't have to deal with as many of the challenges as Dylan and Jen did. I mean, I think that would probably be a question better directed to them. Dylan, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, it was bubblegum and shoestring to try to, you know, put something out there similar to what you're seeing on a court TV on, you know, frankly, this is the first time we did anything like that, and we haven't done anything like that since. So especially that first, I would say, week and a half for me, just getting through those broadcasts and making sure that we were actually live all day. What folks didn't see was me running, you know, hundreds of feet of cable through a muddy parking lot. What people didn't see was generators, multiple generators failing, and me going to Harbor Freight and getting what I needed to fix them and fixing them in the middle of the night in the rain so that we could have power the next day. You know, it was a lot of crazy stuff like that. But I think we ended up putting together a product that we can all look back on a couple months later and say we're really proud of.
Oh, absolutely. And just to backtrack a little bit, how did you find your special projects director, Dylan Nolan, and research director, Jen Wood? How did they come to be with FITSNews?
Well, I think the real story there is that they found me. You know, I think both of you guys slid in my DMs. Was that how all this started?
Don't put it like that.
No, but, you know, I think one of the amazing things about this business is that, you know, true talent and true, I think, determination and, you know, the level of just zeal for truth that we've seen in covering this story, you know, it doesn't always come in the form of these professional journalists. And in fact, I would argue that sometimes the professional journalist background can hamstring you in those efforts. You know, Dylan's an accountant. You know, Dylan's somebody with a financial background. You know, Jen, you know, a cheer mom who has, you know, all sorts of higher ed experience. You know, these are two backgrounds that you wouldn't immediately think. You know, research director for a news outlet or a you know, video producer for a news outlet, but those backgrounds combined with, I guess, whatever the heck I bring to the table. Some days I wonder, but just to see the synergy of those skill sets kind of come together. But Callie, at the heart of it is that, you know, these were people, Dylan, Jen, and myself, who were focused on finding the truth and telling the truth. You know, again, we always talk about there's no agendas here. There's just what it is. And I think that their commitment to that overarching objective and their passion for that, I think really is what enabled us to, again, be competitive against outlets that were a lot bigger and a lot better equipped than we were.
So, Jen, did this seem a daunting task? After all, you had never done anything like this before, right?
Yeah, I remember getting in the car to drive to South Carolina the Sunday before the trial started. And I'm not one that gets nervous often. And I was extremely nervous. It was, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know any of the people, the other members of the press that we'd be covering other than online. So, not having a lot of journalism background, and, I kind of felt out of place. I felt, it was nerve wracking.
And how was the other media?
I was surprised at how it was far more collaborative than I anticipated it being. I would run into somebody and say, "Hey, did I hear that right? Is that what you heard?" And they would, it wasn't like, forget you, I'm not talking, I'm not sharing what I know. Everybody really worked together. And I think when you're embedded in a location like that for 6 weeks, you have to, or you're not going to survive, especially when you're living with Will and Dylan.
I think it's interesting you said embedded. Because I too always think of it as being like in the trenches. Once you're in the trenches, you're not really competing. You're all just in the trenches.
Right. So, and it really is how it felt to me. And, the first day I was there, I ran into Michael DeWitt, and he was just so welcoming and so complimentary of, the work that I'd done to date. And it's, it's just something I still have these relationships to this day. If I have a question about something, I'm working on a big story that's, complicated financially. And, I text Valerie Bowerland from the Wall Street Journal, and she's like, "Oh, hey, I've got some, I've got some resources I can connect you with," which is nice.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. So it sounds like they already knew you guys by reputation. Is that right, Dylan?
I don't know how well known I personally was, but I did definitely get to know these people. Like Jennifer says, you're trapped in there for 6 weeks with the same set of people. I definitely personally got a lot of help from a lot of especially the engineering side from both national and local outlets. So I really appreciated some of those relationships that I got to build with the folks who are behind the news business that people never really get to see.
Yeah, interesting.
But yeah, it was totally collaborative. Whether it was folks in sharing cables and splicing, helping people splice feeds to people in the courtroom, like Jen said, fact checking and making sure that they were hearing things correctly. It was a totally collaborative effort, and it's amazing to see that in any environment with members of the media, but it's particularly amazing to see it in an environment like that one where there was so much competition for scoops and where the stakes were so high for the media outlets covering this stuff to be first. And so it was refreshing to see that. And I will point out that I think a lot of that was due to the fact that, and I won't drop too many names here, but I think a lot of that was due to the fact that everybody who was there was committed to that sort of collaborative model. I'll say it that way. How about that? Everyone who was there was committed to that collaborative model.
It's funny. I remember leading up to Alex testifying. I can't remember who broke that. Was it Tad?
I think the Channel 2 in Charleston, Riley. I think Riley broke that
Riley,
first.
That's right. Riley Benson broke it. And, it was, you could tell he was nervous about breaking it. And it was fun to watch him break that story and get that recognition and give him, positive feedback. It was acknowledge it when, we were covering it. So, I don't know. I enjoy that. I don't like getting beat to a story ever, but I enjoyed, he was so excited.
Well, and there was also a willingness on the part of everybody there, to give credit. If people were breaking stuff, everybody there would credit them. It really was, again, a surprisingly collaborative press corps for that whole trial. And it lasted all 6 weeks. That was the other thing, is you think, how does that kind of cooperation go on that long with a trial lasting that long? But it was also impressive to see how everyone kind of, once those bonds were formed, everybody really stuck together. And, I've seen people kind of criticize that. They've been critical of the press's coverage. of this trial. There's been a lot of that recently. I just didn't see it. Again, being at, if you're not there, you don't know what you're talking about. If you're not there bringing these kind of criticisms in after the fact, it just, to me, if you weren't there, you don't know what happened. And if you were there, I think anybody who is, taking pot shots at various media outlets for their coverage. I mean, I'm the first to criticize other media outlets. FITSNews has always been eager to call out our rivals for their shortcomings. But, on this trial, I just think everybody did an exemplary job.
Well, thinking about the whole trial experience, was it anything like you expected it might be? Dylan, maybe you could start with that one.
Yeah, I mean, Murdaugh trial down in Colleton County. What do you expect? Things to not go as normal. And where are we almost a year later? Things certainly didn't go normally. It certainly looks like there was some sort of Colleton, I don't know what you want to say, something in the water. There's just too much. And it didn't feel normal during the trial. It didn't feel like a normal criminal proceeding. It certainly felt like an event in a way that I don't know that it should have felt that way when we were down there. I mean, Jennifer, you can recall this. I talked to you about my skin crawling multiple times thinking, what's going on here?
I think people watching it from outside probably had a very different impression because I feel like Judge Newman had a tight control of the actual courtroom. So what people saw on TV was it felt controlled, it felt normal. But outside the courtroom, I mean, I remember the security being lined up and them bringing Alex in and the press crowding around and, like the cameraman trying to get the best shot. And, we had rumors going into the trial that, be careful because the cowboy gang members have threatened to shoot up Walterboro during the trial. I mean, it was just crazy.
Bomb threat mid-trial.
Bomb threat, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, yeah. What was that like when all of a sudden you've announced the rumor and then bomb threat? Jen,
we're just trying to get on air as quickly as possible. Talk about it.
It was weird.
We were live on air. We stayed live on air.
I mean, Will was in the courtroom that day because I was running the live feed and you can't bring your laptop in the courtroom. And he, the way that Judge Newman dismissed the audience, the courtroom was very controlled and everybody kind of strolled out, but you knew something was happening. And, everybody kind of came out as a massive crowd. And Dylan's like, we got to get live. We have to get live right now. And Will still hadn't made his way back. And then he was asking, he was out there talking to people, trying to figure out what was going on. And so, I was just like, I'm not.
And that was the day that I left the microphone pack in my pocket that I forgot was on and dropped the F word on our live stream. Sorry, Mom.
His mom's texting him.
His mom's still mad
you're
at him.
live.
Oh.
Christina's still mad at him.
The audience loved it. I guess that says a lot about you people, the FITSNews fans.
Yeah, I mean, that's not something I have. I don't have experience doing, TV news. So it was just like on the fly trying to figure out, I'm not the greatest public speaker in the first place. And, trying to figure out what to say. And Will's feeding me information and I'm hearing things in the background. And, you're seeing the bomb squad come in.
Right. It was crazy.
Could there have been more
It was
pressure?
surreal.
Wow. That's really something.
Oh, yeah. My mom texted me.
Of course.
Are you okay? I think
most
we're
murder
outside
trials
of the
are
blast
not
radius.
a cultural event. They don't have this craziness associated with it.
Right, right. Did it feel orchestrated? And did anything about the environment change after the bomb threat?
I thought that, especially as they just said, when court was in session, Newman had that thing locked down under control. I thought that any anything that was, it was just the environment that surrounded the proceedings. Like, let's just look at somebody like Joe McCullough. How many trials are you covering where there's an attorney who's basically a stalking horse, a person who has very known ties to one of the parties, which is freely associating with the whole press corps, and then also associating with court officials? Like that is why I was not surprised when this whole thing turned into a sloppy mess months after, because you see this going down in live time, and you're like, this is just not how a normal murder trial works.
I mean, it was nice. I mean,
I have no problem with Joe. It's not.
Yeah, no, me either. I mean, it was nice having all these, knowledgeable attorneys, people who were familiar with the case, around, because, Justin Bamberg would walk by and I'd be like, "Hey, Justin," he'd be like, "Hey, Bo," I'm like, "Can I?"
We could talk to Justin.
Something?
We could talk to Eric.
Right.
We could talk to the folks who were close on the defense side. I'm not saying there weren't attorneys on both sides. My point is, this was a very unique experience for everybody involved.
Yeah, good point. And fascinating. I mean, I think there's this fascination with this whole story that continues inexplicably to us, maybe. But it maybe is even gathering steam as we continue to go through time. Have you seen anything like that before, Will?
I mean, I don't think anybody has seen anything like this case before, even before we learned of the, allegations of the jury tampering and all of the attendant saga of clerk of court Becky Hill. No, I think it's unprecedented. I think it was unprecedented before all that happened, and I think obviously we're now in completely uncharted territory as we weigh the possibility of a second trial and doing this again, which I can tell you, my wife, after 6 weeks being a single mom to 7 kids, she's not looking forward to the prospect of doing that with 8. In the event we have a second trial in 2024. But, I will say this, I think Dylan spoke just a moment ago about that kind of familiarity between everybody that was involved. And, we were talking about how everybody was very collegial on the press side, but it was the same with the attorneys. It was the same with not only their, spinmeisters. I think you can call Joe McCullough a spinmeister for the defense. I think that's a fair characterization. But it was the same with the attorneys. Dick Arputland and Jim Griffin weren't shy about speaking with the press. Neither were some of the folks on the state side. I think Creighton Waters was pretty tight-lipped. I think the only combos I had with him were about his guitar playing. But there were folks on both sides that were communicating with us extensively during the trial, and obviously we had a network of sources that was keeping us abreast of what the jury was thinking, how they were responding. So we had very good connections there, and it turned out to be very accurate connections once we figured out a little bit more about how the deliberations were going.
I'm glad you brought that up, by the way, because throughout the trial, the media should not know what the jury is thinking. And I've spoken with multiple of our colleagues in the months since this trial, and we were not the only ones with this information.
That's accurate.
That's interesting. And it wasn't through observation. It's not like you were sitting there looking at their faces.
I wouldn't go within a country mile of a juror. Are you kidding me? I don't want to be held in contempt of court. I don't want to go up on a stand and say I talked to a juror, because what else are you putting yourself in that position if you do something like that?
Yeah, no, this was all indirect. It was from sources that knew, who had basically a daily running count of where that jury was. But no, we didn't speak to any jurors. There were some jurors who had indicated through, I think, back channels a desire to speak with us after the trial. But, those kind of dried up after the trial, which again could be tied to some other stuff that we're hearing related to other media outlets. I ain't going to get into any of that on this podcast. We'll let all that shake out. But, the other thing I do want to point out is, this trial wasn't perfect from a standpoint of how the media was given access or not given access to certain things. I do want to bring one thing up, Callie, because, some of the restrictions when they were initially announced by Judge Newman, I wasn't happy about. For example, not bringing your cell phone in, not being able to bring your laptop in. To me, I didn't think that was fair. I thought that was going to be very limiting to our ability to do the job. But I think in the end, Judge Newman ended up being correct on that, because the point was, if you've got a bunch of reporters clattering away on their keyboards at different moments in the trial, that could lead the jury to pay attention to them clattering as opposed to what they should be paying attention to, and it would have created a bias on the part of the media, filtering to the jury. And so I think he was correct there. But one area where I'm still a little bit upset about, and I think really the public was done a disservice, was the court blocking access to the sealed exhibits, even to the media. Now, we saw all of them, obviously, and a lot of them had been provided to us before the trial. So we had some provided before the trial, some provided during the trial. But when you look at those exhibits, the testimony that you heard started to make a lot of sense, particularly the state's case of the forensics of the wounds, the state's theory of how the wounds were the impacts, the angles. The state was correct in their assertions. And when you look at whether it's the crime scene photos, whether it's the autopsy photos, you very quickly see, oh, well, the defense's theory on these was not holding a lot of water. And so I think the problem I had was that I don't think the court trusted the media to handle that the right way. And again, I don't know what fed that. I can't say, but I think that we, at the very least, should have been allowed to review those in private and relate our impressions of those to the public. Because once you see them, you very clearly, it's very obvious that the prosecution's theory of at least how the crime went down was accurate, and the defense's was not.
That's very interesting. And I have to say, considering what you just said about having access to the sealed exhibits, and also having some insight into the jury and where they were day to day. I mean, wow. Should this trial have been in Colleton County?
That's what I've long said since this trial, is that Newman's first mistake was denying the defense's motion to move the trial. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to say that was a great ruling, as much as we might like Judge Newman. Clearly, it was too hot down there.
It's hard to describe how small that area is. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody is connected.
When they got to take
everybody.
your granddaddy off the wall so that you can get a fair trial, that's a real good indication of what's going on.
I mean, you would say, I talked to somebody who lives in that area, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's my second cousin." I mean, everybody has had interactions with the Murdaugh family and Alex Murdaugh, whether it's, just running into him in the store or they handled a court case for him. I mean, I agree with Dylan on that. That trial needed to be outside of that area.
And it leads us to this situation we're in now, where we have all these people who are going to be witnesses or are submitting complaints in the Becky Hill situation, who have ties to people that have ties to Alex Murdaugh. And you're now left like, what's your motivation for doing this? Why is this complaint coming forward now? I'm not saying that the things in these complaints aren't true. I'm not saying Becky isn't in a very serious situation right now. But you also wonder, if there was no Alex Murdaugh trial, if that trial was held in the upstate, would these complaints have ever surfaced?
I mean, hindsight is 20/20. Obviously, I think if Judge Newman had this decision over, he would have absolutely moved it. I think he would have probably sent it maybe to Clarendon, maybe to Sumter. Tried to find a place that was similar demographically to Colleton, but maybe not so close to the Murdaugh family. And again, all of these connections, because Dylan pointed out just there a very good point. As we contemplate the allegations against Becky Hill, they're very serious. Certainly the two ethics complaints, which Jen has detailed in her reporting, the jury tampering allegations, the arrest of her son on eavesdropping charges. I mean, this is a serious situation, but there are, potential forces moving on the other side that you can't discount. And so I think as we look at who is going to be responsible for the investigation of the Hills, as we look for who is going to be responsible for deciding whether or not the allegations warrant a new trial for Alex Murdaugh, it's very important moving forward for everybody involved to avoid even the slightest appearance of a conflict. And, that has just created a very tough situation, particularly for the Office of Attorney General Alan Wilson. obviously the Hill matter is currently before Wilson's office. He's accepted jurisdiction of it. And so he's got a big decision to make as it relates to that. And I think that decision could go a long way in determining whether we end up with a second trial.
Right. Well, let's talk about some of your favorites and less favorites. First of all, let's just start with the food, because I've heard that the food available during the trial was phenomenal. So what was your favorite meal?
Like, Will would go over to the food trucks and know them all by name and like what they were having every day. Like, it's
I don't want to talk about my cholesterol readings after this trial. They're not good, but it was awesome. I mean, soul food, barbecue. It was just unbelievable. And then we would go down to the Barrel House in the evenings, get a good steak there and dodge bullets in the parking lot. Yeah, it was awesome. I mean,
we also reported on a shooting that went down in the parking lot of the place where we frequently ate during the trial.
Right.
We weren't the only ones there. One day we went in and the entire prosecution team was there, and they sat us right next to them. And Will's like, everybody needs space.
Yeah. We had the waitress move us because they weren't going to be able to speak. But then there was a great Italian restaurant.
That's what I was going to say. Carmine's down on Main Street. Yeah.
It's amazing. And then what was the one that really did the damage to my cholesterol was the what was it?
The Stromboli place where the fist fight broke out.
Oh,
yeah. Y'all, the Borough it's a bit rough.
It was never a dull day.
They're keeping that court busy.
And I would need a break, so I'd like just get my purse and go down to Twig, this little shop, and spend like $300. My husband was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like,
Retail therapy. All right. Yeah. Well, as far as the proceedings themselves, who was the hero and who was the zero?
Jen, you want to start with that one? Can't wait to hear these answers.
Oh boy, that's a tough one. It was such every testimony brought like something like, oh my gosh. I think Alex testifying on his own behalf was absolutely like the zero. Like, I still cannot believe that happened. The hero. John Metter's closing argument, I think, might be one of my favorite moments during the trial. And, we didn't hear from him a ton during the trial, but when he got up and started speaking during the closing, I was like, oh, this is why they brought him in.
What are your thoughts, Dylan, on that? Heroes and zeros?
I think my hero is probably going to be Paul for recording the Snapchat video. To me, that was the most consequential piece of evidence in the whole trial, because Alex just completely put all his chips on that lie that he wasn't around the scene of the crime, and that completely unraveled it. And if I was on that jury, that would be what would make me say, I don't know that piece of evidence proves that he pulled the trigger, but if I'm looking at whether or not I'm going to convict you of the crime, I don't really care at that point if you've shown the evidence that piece of if that piece of evidence shows the character that he clearly has. And so my zero is Alex Murdaugh, not only for the double homicide, but for the financial crimes that indicate that he does not have the emotions or moral compass that any decent human being has.
Always a thoughtful answer from Dylan. Always. Will, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't really give a hero award out without looking at Creighton Waters. And again, I don't know if he's necessarily a fan of mine. I don't know if I'm necessarily a huge fan of his. He's one of the few people in this drama I've never really had a very close connection with. But I think from his opening argument, and he had a little bit of assistance from divine intervention, because he talked about a gathering storm that led Alec Murdaugh to commit these graphic murders. And as he talked about that gathering storm, on cue, thunder and lightning outside the courtroom, and rain starting to pelt down on the walls of that and roof of that historic structure. It was a moment you could really feel it. Kind of, your hair stands up a little bit. None on my head, but you just feel it kind of. And I think from that moment and all the way through, a lot of people said he got pedantic at different parts of the trial and a little too in the weeds. But his ability to have command over a very broad range of facts, law, his ability to argue on the fly when the defense fired motions at him. I mean, the guy did an amazing job. I mean, say what you will about him. He did an amazing job as a lead prosecutor. And so I have to throw that love to him. Also, I can't say this without, no prosecutor is any good unless he's got good witnesses. And I think Kenneth Kinsey did an amazing job testifying on behalf of the state. And I think there's a reason that Kenneth Kinsey has become very well known and sought after in the aftermath of this trial. It's how well he did during the trial. And so I think those two would be the folks I would single. As for zeros, guys, I think that's to be determined, because if we end up with a new trial, I think the zero is going to be Ms. Becky, unfortunately. But certainly Alec Murdaugh testifying was, I think, the low point for everybody. And certainly as we watched him offer thoughts at the recent hearing in Beaufort when he pled guilty to the financial crimes, I think we were all reminded of just how full of it this guy is. But yeah, I think the zero is TBD, y'all.
All right. Well, you mentioned Dr. Kinsey. Jen, did you have a favorite or best witness on your list?
Well, I mean, the entire trial, I was just waiting for Cousin Eddie. I told Will, I'm like, if he's on the stand, because we really only had one press pass. I was like, I'm in the courtroom when he's on the stand. I'm not like, I will fight you for it. But I mean, I think for me, the witness that made my jaw drop a little bit was Blanca. Like, I mean, she kind of solidified that consciousness of guilt. She was, one of the last people to see everybody and text everybody. So yeah, I think she may have been the one that Mark Tinsley, when he pulled that court order out of his jacket.
That was a moment. That was an unbelievable moment, wasn't it?
Dylan and I were both like, whoa. So yeah, I think that was definitely. And then I remember when Paul's friends were testifying, that was probably the hardest moment for me. It was kind of the first time I got a sense of who Paul was as a person outside of, everything we'd reported about the boating accident. He had friends. He was loved by his friends. I remember I had to take a break and go to the Taj Mahal and just kind of collect myself, because I was getting way more emotional than I'm comfortable with. But yeah, those were probably, my favorite moments, and then the hardest moment.
Those are the people I immediately think about when I think about the possibility of doing a new trial.
What they would have to go through.
All over again.
Yeah. It seems a shame, not just in terms of dollars wasted and time wasted, but you're right. All the turmoil people have to dig up and relive. That's a
Dylan,
lot.
What was your favorite or best witness or favorite witness? What do you think, Dylan? I just wonder if
probably
you're
Miss Michelle. And for a very similar reason to Blanca, I just think it was so telling.
She had me on the edge of my seat. Yeah.
And because, to me, Michelle's, Shelley, I think she was the one who first introduced what was later proven by the timeline, which was that Alec Murdaugh was lying about when he was certain places on the night of that murder. And she was the one that first pointed out that his timeline didn't match, that it wasn't accurate. and she was just incredibly believable. You could tell the jury was completely bought in to her testimony. So I'm with Dylan on that one. I think it was absolutely Shelley Smith was I think one of, if not the most important witnesses other than Kenneth Kinsey.
So of what we could not see from watching TV, what was the best moment behind the scenes? Oh, Will, you've got a look on your face. I guess you can go first.
I don't know if I could boil it down to one moment, though. I think it was just, can it be a moment unrelated to the food trucks? Because I had a lot of very special moments. No, I would say this. There were so many individual interactions with people who support our work that, to me anyway, were really, inspiring, humbling, really helped keep me focused on doing the job, because these folks would come up to us. Some of them were people from Walterboro who read FITSNews. Some of them were people from other parts of the state. Some of them were people from out of state that came, and they just kept saying how much they enjoyed and appreciated our coverage, how much they appreciated the work Jen was doing on the research, Dylan's work on our videos. And so hearing all of that just kind of, and every day it would happen 2 or 3 times. And so it was a constant reminder to me anyway, hey, keep it focused, keep doing that job, because this is what the people are expecting from us. They're expecting us to go where the story leads us. They're expecting us to tell the truth as best we know it. And so I think that was, to me anyway, those little one-on-one interactions, whether just running into people outside the courthouse or in the hallways in the courthouse, to me, those were the off-camera moments that meant the most.
Dylan, you want to take it?
I actually really enjoyed, for folks who don't know, Jennifer lives in Louisiana, so I only get to see her a couple times a year. So as much as we joke about living together for 6 weeks, that was a trip at times, but I really did enjoy getting to spend time with her. And we went out and did karaoke. That was probably my favorite part of the whole trial. I'm not going to lie to you.
Tell them where.
What the heck was the name of that place?
I know, it was in Cottageville.
Cottageville.
And it closed at 9.
Folks, if you're ever driving through Cottageville, slow your car down. That is the speed trap of all speed traps. But man, on Wednesday nights, they do have some great karaoke at the place with a million Christmas lights up all year.
Wow. Jen?
I mean, I think it was hard, but I think being there is kind of what solidified, us as a team. We had a lot of really fun behind the scene moments, like the karaoke bar. Really, Dylan and I had so much fun. He was up on stage for an hour with this guy, singing at the top of his lungs. Some guy. And we walk in, and we're Dylan and I, we're nobody. So we walk in, and the second we walk in, people are like, Dylan and Jen, and we're like, what?
Yeah, it was bizarre.
And then, they're videoing us doing karaoke. Can we put this on Instagram? And I'm like, sure. But, Dylan's like, what song do you want to sing? I'm like, you pick. And he's like, Carrie Underwood. And, one night Dylan and I were working late in the trailer, and I discovered he has a deep appreciation for Faith Hill. So we were jamming to Faith Hill at the top of our lungs. We had so much fun.
That's great. That's great. And by the way, shout out to some guy. If you have video, you can send it directly.
We were slamming the Alice in Chains down there on the stage.
Yeah. Very cool. Those moments. That's great. That's really returning back to the courtroom, though. Let's talk about when the verdict came in. So, Will, where were you?
Yeah, it was interesting. We had been, because, phones were not allowed in the courtroom. Couldn't bring them in, and everybody honored that in the press, which was good. But I had been outside. Obviously, this was evening. Sun's down. I've been outside talking to a few I think they're probably in their late 60s, early 70s, some ladies who are big fans of Johnny Medders. And they wanted me to take a video of them and share it with Johnny Medders. So I'd taken the video and was walking into the courthouse, and on the way, somebody kind of tapped my arm and said, it's happening. There's a verdict. And so I kind of walked over to Johnny, who was sitting downstairs with some of the other prosecutors. Fernandez, I think, was with them. And I said, hey, you guys might want to get upstairs. I think they've got a verdict. And Fernandez, was kind of incredulous. Like, no, they don't. I was like, hey, you might want to check it out, man. And so that, I tweeted something real quick that something might be happening. And I later heard from one of the TV crew guys that he was on his way to dinner and saw our tweet and immediately turned around and came back. And he later came to me. I was like, you saved my job by tweeting that, because we were all getting ready to go to dinner. But yeah, it was bizarre. And then to see it very quickly, after that tweet went out, like a couple minutes later, reporters start streaming back in there. The clerk and her staff start streaming back in there. Prosecutors, the defense attorneys, and it was clear that this was getting ready to happen. And yeah, it was wild. To me, the craziest moment was one that I don't think it got a lot of press, but it was watching Alec Murdaugh turn around after the verdicts were announced and looking at Buster and saying, I'm sorry, I love you. And then watching Buster just emotionless in response. That was, to me, watching that as it happened literally 10 feet away was surreal.
Dylan, what did you have to do? I imagine you had to move pretty quickly when you found out the verdict was in.
Well, it's interesting, as Will just pointed out, a lot of these national folks who are used to cover, they fly around the country and do this trial to trial to trial. I think they expected a longer deliberation period because that is what you would expect. I think those of us in the South Carolina press corps, I want to point to somebody like Drew Tripp, people who really understand the kind of underlying dynamics of how things go here. I don't think that anybody was super surprised that it was a quick verdict. But we were sitting there ready to go. We were ready for that thing. And when it came down, man, it was just surreal on a personal level. Just, okay, we now have this verdict. 6 weeks of hearing the evidence. The jury has reached their verdict, and it was good to hear because I agreed with the verdict personally, and I would have felt that the state of South Carolina would have been kind of robbed if it didn't go that way. So on a personal level, so I was also very happy when that news came down.
Jen, what about you?
I was surprised. I thought it would be quick, but I was surprised at just how quick it was.
Maybe if folks have been allowed to go out and smoke a cigarette. that one's gonna get me in some trouble.
Yeah, I was surprised, and then it was just kind of like, all right, we got to go. And I was surprised at how emotional I was about it.
Right, that's what I was just saying. We cover the news. We're not supposed to get in our feelings about this, but I think it's hard not to when you've been there and listening to this evidence for 6 weeks, and you've been covering this story for a very long time. You almost feel as though you have connections to the victims.
Yeah, I texted my husband. I'm like, I'm coming home. I'd been away from my kids for 6 weeks. I missed my daughters. That's the other thing. We did not
have normal lives at all for that time period.
I missed my daughter's national cheer competition. They won nationals while I was gone. I had Henry's teacher on the phone, during breaks. It was not an easy thing to do. I'd do it again. I wouldn't even hesitate if,
You may have
back.
to. You may eat those words.
But yeah, it was emotional for a lot of reasons.
I think the sweetest story I have heard about the verdict coming in was from Mrs. Folks, who told me they watched it on TV and the kids cried because they knew Daddy was coming home. That's pretty sweet. Yeah,
she not a lot of people knew this, and obviously, as we filmed this, my wife is pregnant with our eighth. She's due in late April, but not a lot of folks know this. But and she's talked about it since, so I don't think I'm betraying any trust by saying it. But we've had several losses, in the course of our marriage. Obviously we got an ass of kids, but we've had a couple losses, several losses as well. And she had one literally right as the trial was starting,
the
and
first
so
week.
It was rough. They actually came down the first weekend to pick me up and take me back. And I don't think that in the 16 years we've been married, I don't think I've ever been happier to see her, and she's ever been happier to see me, because she was having to deal with that alone. I even actually offered to not attend the first week of the trial because I felt like I should be there with her, but she insisted. She absolutely insisted. She said, "You have to do this. This is your story."
We tried. We were like, he can come home, and Katrina's a trooper. She was like, "No, I got this. I got this."
Yeah, and she actually came down, and we had as Dylan probably can recall, we had a number of logistical issues during the trial, but Katrina came down several times to handle those and help monitor my food intake as well. But yeah, that's nice of you to say, Callie. She really did help support all we were doing behind the scenes.
It really does take an army, not just the people on the air, but the people who support, the people who are bringing the story live. What a great team. I know I was watching you guys, and that's what made me want to come to work for FITSNews. So, and it's very interesting that the small enterprise got engaged with this story of national fascination. Can't speak, but national fascination. And then covered it as though you were court TV, live every day, the leading source for developments in the case.
And I might not be as pretty as Chanley Painter, but I think my commentary might even be better. So
there you go. You definitely know what you're talking about. So, sorry.
Well, once again, just a total team effort. And again, I can't say this enough because, I hate to say it, but not everybody I've worked with on this story has been focused on the right thing. But the commitment of Dylan, of Jen, Jen was doing that live feed every day, minute by minute, updating everything that was happening in that courtroom. Dylan was running that live stream every day, 6 weeks, and they were not only that, but they're doing reporting from the trial as they're doing that. I can't say enough about the two of them for the work they did during those whole 6 weeks. And again, when you're focused on the job, and not looking around, it's easier. But this was definitely something that, if we end up doing it again, I think there's some things we'll probably do differently because we're always trying to do better. But I was proud to work with these two on this trial, and just can't say enough about the work they did. So.
And along that thought, how do you see this being different if we do version 2?
I think there'll be a different clerk.
If we have a second version, certainly, but we won't be in that jurisdiction anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it won't be in Colleton. I think it'll probably...
They learned their lesson there.
Yeah, I think it'll probably be in Sumter, South Carolina. That seems to be the consensus. And again, it's still... We're speaking of this in the context of a done deal. I don't think it's a done deal that Alec Murdaugh gets a new trial. I think the odds are exponentially higher today than they were even a few months ago when these jury tampering allegations were first raised. I think, we're looking at a situation where it's more likely than not that he will get a new trial, but it's not a done deal at this point. So just got to wait and find out. But hey, we'll be there.
Right. And I think that's key, actually, is that FITSNews has been there from the beginning of the Murdaugh controversy, through the trial, daily coverage, and then going into 2024, who knows what's going to happen. But once again, FITSNews will be there.
As long as they keep me away from the food trucks.
Well, thanks, guys, for sharing your thoughts with me today. I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. A lot of things I wanted to ask you guys about this trial. I was fascinated, too. So we'll close with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Callie.
Thank you.